It's been clear that some of the rebuilding teams in the NBA will need time. They've been having rough years, but teams like the Spurs have some bright futures ahead of them. When you look at the teams in a rebuilding phase, there's one that's different. Rebuilding teams are only a few years in, but then there's the Detroit Pistons. They might have had a few All-Stars and first-round exits, but the team hasn't played serious playoff basketball since 2008. The other teams in rebuild mode right now were competing in the playoffs during that same time span. There's a point in a rebuild where the losing doesn't feel like a temporary thing. At what point does constant losing begin to linger with the franchise, and how long should a rebuilding team be bad before there should be worries? So that's the plan with this video. We'll look at the timeline of rebuilds, find the point when the rebuild lasts longer than average, and see if longer rebuilds cause this feeling. First, we have to identify 2 points, the beginning and end of a rebuild. It's pretty easy to pinpoint when a rebuild begins. Typically, it's when a team loses one of their best players. The second or third best player on the team might begin the rebuild, but it's usually the best player on the team that starts it. Let's use a couple of examples to make my point. When LeBron left in free agency both times, the Cavaliers started rebuilds. In 2021, the Rockets started their rebuild when they traded James Harden. After MJ's second retirement, the Bulls restarted their roster. Once a team loses some key players, they bring in young guys and picks with the plan for long-term improvement. When having this conversation, the difference between a rebuilding and a retooling roster has to be pointed out. Let's compare a rebuilding roster, the 2024 Trailblazers, to one that was retooling, the 2020 Warriors. When a team is rebuilding, they go back to square one with the new core. The Blazers traded their original core of CJ, Nurkic, and Dame, and then brought in younger new talent. The transition to a rebuild took longer than usual for Portland, so you could see the gradual addition of younger players. First, it was Simons who became an important part of their core, then it was Shaedon, then it was Scoot, and then the players after trading Dame and Drew. Sometimes, older players are a part of a new era, and young guys contribute before the rebuild, but the franchise shakes up the roster when a team is rebuilding. On the other hand, a retooling team doesn't start from scratch. The Warriors front office still expected the team to be led by Curry, Clay, and Draymond. While the team did add some young new faces like Jordan Poole, the original foundation that the team had was still there. Another big difference between retooling and rebuilding is how long each is expected to take. Looking at Golden State, they were expected to return to their championship form a year or two after 2020. Retooling would be a brief point in their era, and it was brief in reality. The team would go on to win the championship just 2 years later. When a team is rebuilding, the expectation is that it'll be a slow process that could take multiple years. Now that we clarified what the beginning of a rebuild looks like, let's point to when a rebuild ends. It's hard to find the end of a rebuild because of how subjective it is. One person might believe rebuild ends once you finish with a record over 500, while someone else might believe it ends once you win a championship. I wanted to find a more objective way to look at it, but there isn't one that's consistent. Before starting the video, I thought I'd use playoff appearances to say a team's rebuild is done. After thinking about it, that would mean teams like the 2022 Raptors and the 2020 Thunder would be considered teams that were finished with their rebuilds. But those teams still had work to do and would miss the playoffs in the following years. The point that a rebuild will be considered done is when the team has their franchise cornerstones that the front office believes can make multiple serious playoff runs. The front office also makes win-now moves to improve the roster. Let's use the reigning champions as an example of when a rebuild is completed. By the end of their 2018-19 season, there was a rough outline to their modern roster. Just like today, the core was led by Jamal and Jokic. Even though he didn't play during the season because of injury, a rookie MPJ was also on the roster. They also had Gary Harris on the team, who had some similarities to KCP and would be part of the trade for Aaron Gordon a few years later. With this group, they would finish with a record of 54-28, which gave the team the second seed in the West. Regarding the playoffs, the team won a close series against a respectable franchise and was 5 points away from making the conference finals. Since then, the team has had the MVP twice, made multiple conference finals appearances, been considered one of the best teams in the league, have had a record well over 500, and won the championship. Now that we've established these factors, how long do rebuilds last? This is a list of every team I'd consider to be finished with their rebuilds. Next to the team's name is when the rebuild started and ended. If you want to know why I considered a team done, ask in the comments and I'll answer. Using these teams, a rebuild takes roughly 4 years to complete. Based on the point I made about the feeling of losing, did teams that had longer rebuilds than average begin to feel like losing franchises? I'd say yes and no. Teams that had rebuilds that lasted at least 5 years are Chicago, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Denver, Sacramento, Golden State, and the Lakers. If you ask the Sixers fan about the team in the middle of their trust the process era, some would probably say that the losing didn't feel temporary. The same could be said for a lot of the teams in this group. Ask a Suns fan in 2019 or a Kings fan in 2021. Teams reached that point, but most of them aren't experiencing losing like that today. In the past 3 years, Every one of the teams in this group has made the playoffs, and only one of them missed the playoffs last year. 4 out of the 5 most recent champions had rebuilds that lasted over 5 years. Sacramento and Phoenix both took 6 years to finish their rebuilds. They're tied for the longest amount of time. Yet, if you look at them in the past year, you wouldn't think of them as losing organizations. The losing feeling begins once you pass 4 years, but some teams use their time wisely and consistently improve. Both Chicago and Golden State took 5 years. Even though they took the same amount of time, the Warriors became a dynasty, while the Bulls have a first-round exit and the feeling that another rebuild is coming soon. Just because the team is done with their rebuild doesn't make them champions. Here's the thing. The losing feeling is felt in the moment, but fades over time as the team wins. I've brought them up a lot, but the Warriors are a great example of this. The public opinion about the franchise in 2009 versus today is completely different. They're now viewed as one of the best franchises in the league. Comparing them to the Pistons, the reverse almost happened. The respect Detroit had built slowly faded, so younger fans view them as a losing franchise. Some teams that I said finished rebuilding before they reached 4 years have been struggling to find playoff success. Other teams felt the losing feeling even though their rebuilds were shorter. Deciding if a rebuild has caused damage is a case-by-case situation. Picks, injuries, free agency, trades, and many other factors change how long a team rebuilds and how good the team becomes. GMs, coaches, and team owners need to utilize those assets properly to achieve the most success.